My name is Jasmine, and I never thought my own sister would be the one to destroy the biggest opportunity of my life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. On that cold Tuesday morning in Chicago, when everything seemed perfect, I was sitting in my small studio apartment in Lincoln Park, the kind of place where you can touch both walls if you stretch your arms wide enough. The rent ate up half my salary as a junior graphic designer at a small marketing firm downtown. The morning light filtered through my single window, casting long shadows across my makeshift desk where my laptop hummed quietly. I had just received the email that would change everything, or so I thought at the time. Goldman Creative Solutions, one of the most prestigious design agencies in the Midwest, wanted to interview me for their senior creative director position. My hands were actually shaking as I read the email for the third time. "Dear Jasmine," it began, "we were impressed by your portfolio and would like to invite you for an interview this Friday at 2 p.m. Please confirm your attendance by Wednesday evening." This was it. This was the break I'd been waiting for since graduating from the Art Institute of Chicago 3 years ago. The salary they mentioned in the initial screening call was double what I was making now, enough to finally move out of this shoebox and maybe even start paying off my student loans. The journey to this moment hadn't been easy. After graduation, I'd spent 8 months working at a coffee shop in Andersonville, desperately applying to design positions while my classmates landed internships at prestigious agencies. The rejection emails piled up in my inbox like fallen leaves, polite but devastating reminders that my portfolio wasn't quite good enough, my experience wasn't quite extensive enough, my network wasn't quite strong enough. When I finally landed my current job at Midwest Marketing Solutions, I was so grateful just to be working in my field that I didn't care about the mediocre pay or uninspiring projects. For 2.5 years, I'd been designing advertisements for furniture stores, creating social media graphics for local restaurants, and developing brochures for insurance companies. It wasn't the creative work I'd dreamed of, but it was paying the bills and building my portfolio. But Goldman Creative Solutions represented everything I'd always wanted. They worked with national brands, created campaigns that won awards, pushed creative boundaries in ways that made other agencies take notice. Their recent campaign for a sustainable fashion brand had been featured in Communication Arts magazine, and their rebrand of a major food delivery service had transformed the company's entire market position. The creative director position would put me in charge of conceptualizing and executing high-level campaigns, mentoring junior designers, and working directly with clients who had budgets that could support truly innovative work. It was the kind of job that could define my entire career trajectory. I immediately called my sister Taylor. She was the only family I had left since our parents passed away in a car accident 2 years prior. We'd become closer than ever, supporting each other through the grief and the financial struggles that followed. She lived in Wicker Park, about 15 minutes away, and we talked almost every day. The accident had happened on a rainy Tuesday evening in November. Mom and Dad were driving home from dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant in Little Italy, the same place they'd been going for date nights since before Taylor and I were born. A drunk driver ran a red light at the intersection of Taylor and Racine, hitting their car at full speed. They were both killed instantly. The weeks that followed were a blur of funeral arrangements, insurance claims, and legal paperwork. Taylor and I had to sell our childhood home in Ravenswood to pay for the funeral costs and settle their debts. We divided their personal belongings with the kind of careful deliberation that only comes when you know these objects are all you have left of the people you love most. The grief counselor we saw for a few months after the funeral told us that shared trauma often brings siblings closer together or drives them completely apart. For Taylor and me, it was definitely the former. We started having weekly dinners, calling each other multiple times a day, and including each other in every major and minor decision. We'd promised each other at the funeral that we'd never let anything come between us, that we'd always be there for each other no matter what. Which is why I was so excited to share this news with her. Taylor had always been my biggest cheerleader, celebrating my small victories and encouraging me through my setbacks. When I'd landed my current job, she'd insisted on taking me out for champagne even though we could barely afford it. When my first design was featured in a local magazine, she'd bought 3 copies and distributed them to everyone in her building. "Tay, you're not going to believe this," I said as soon as she picked up. The excitement in my voice was impossible to hide. "What's up, Jazz? You sound like you just won the lottery or something." "Better than the lottery. I got the interview. The Goldman Creative Solutions interview. They want to see me Friday afternoon. There was a pause on the other end. I thought maybe the connection had dropped, which happens sometimes in our old building. Taylor, you there? Yeah, I'm here. That's amazing, Jasmine. I'm so happy for you. Her voice sounded strange, flat somehow, but I was too excited to really notice. I know, right? I can't believe it. After all those rejections, all those thanks but no thanks emails, this is finally happening. I'm going to spend the next 3 days preparing. I want to know everything about their company culture, their recent campaigns, their client roster, everything. That sounds like a great plan, she said, still in that odd tone. Hey, I should probably let you go so you can start preparing. Wait, do you want to grab dinner tomorrow night? I could use someone to practice my interview answers with. I can't tomorrow. I have plans, but good luck with everything, Jazz. I really mean that. After we hung up, I stared at my phone for a moment. Something felt off about that conversation, but I pushed the feeling aside. Taylor had been dealing with some personal issues lately, problems with her boyfriend Derek, and stress from her job as a social media manager at a tech startup downtown. She was probably just distracted. The truth was, Taylor had been acting strange for the past few weeks. She'd been more distant during our usual coffee dates, checking her phone constantly and seeming preoccupied. When I'd asked about work, her answers had been vague and sometimes contradictory. She'd mentioned a big client presentation one week, then claimed the next week that they'd lost the client entirely. Her stories about Derek had become increasingly elaborate and hard to follow. I'd attributed her behavior to stress. Her job at the tech startup sounded demanding and unpredictable, with long hours and constantly shifting priorities. And Derek, from what she'd told me, seemed like the kind of guy who created drama wherever he went. Last month, she'd spent an entire evening crying over some fight they'd had about his ex-girlfriend. And the week before that, she'd been upset because he'd canceled their vacation plans at the last minute. Looking back now, I realized there were signs that something was seriously wrong. But at the time, I was too caught up in my own career struggles to pay close attention to the inconsistencies in her stories. I was working overtime at my current job, freelancing on weekends to make extra money, and spending every free moment applying for better positions. I didn't have the mental bandwidth to analyze my sister's increasingly erratic behavior. I spent the rest of Tuesday researching Goldman Creative Solutions. Their website showcased incredible work. Campaigns for major brands like Nike, Apple, and local Chicago institutions like the Art Institute and the Bulls. Their office was in the Loop, in one of those gleaming skyscrapers that I'd walk past on lunch breaks, always wondering what it would be like to work somewhere like that. The more I learned about the company, the more convinced I became that this was exactly where I belonged. Their creative philosophy aligned perfectly with my own beliefs about design, that good creative work should be both beautiful and meaningful, that it should solve real problems while engaging audiences emotionally. Their case studies showed campaigns that had increased brand awareness, driven sales, and even influenced social behavior. I spent hours studying their recent work, taking notes on their visual style, their messaging strategies, and their approach to different types of clients. I analyzed their color palettes, typography choices, and layout principles. I watched interviews with their creative team and read articles about their company culture and design process. The creative director position would put me in charge of a team of 12 designers and copywriters. I'd oversee campaigns from concept to completion, work directly with high-profile clients, and finally have the creative freedom I'd been craving. At my current job, I mostly designed social media graphics and touched up stock photos. This would be my chance to do real creative work, the kind that wins awards and gets featured in design magazines. I also researched the interview process itself. From what I could find online, Goldman was known for thorough, challenging interviews that tested both creative skills and strategic thinking. Candidates were expected to present their portfolio, discuss their creative process in detail, and demonstrate their ability to think critically about brand challenges. Some forums mentioned case study exercises where candidates had to develop creative solutions on the spot. The thought of being tested at that level was both terrifying and exhilarating. I'd spent 3 years working on relatively simple projects with limited creative scope. This would be my chance to prove that I could handle complex, high-stakes creative challenges. Wednesday morning came and went in a blur of preparation. I created a new presentation showcasing my best work, complete with case studies explaining my creative process. I researched the interview panel. The CEO, Margaret Goldman herself, would be there, along with the head of HR and the outgoing creative director who was moving to their LA office. I spent hours refining my portfolio, organizing it both digitally and in the leather binder my parents had given me for graduation. Each piece was accompanied by detailed explanations of the project objectives, my creative approach, and the results we'd achieved. I included work from my current job, but also personal projects and freelance work that better demonstrated my creative range and vision. Margaret Goldman was somewhat of a legend in the Chicago design community. She'd started the agency 15 years ago with 2 employees and had grown it into one of the most respected creative firms in the Midwest. Her background was in advertising, but she'd built Goldman Creative Solutions around the philosophy that good design could change the world. Under her leadership, the agency had won numerous industry awards and had been featured in publications like Fast Company and Adweek. The head of HR, Patricia Chen, had a reputation for asking thoughtful, challenging questions about work style and team dynamics. From what I'd read in online forums, she was particularly interested in how candidates handled feedback, managed stress, and collaborated with colleagues from different departments. The outgoing creative director, James Morrison, was moving to Los Angeles to launch Goldman's West Coast office. His work at the Chicago location had been consistently innovative and award-winning. I'd studied his campaigns extensively, trying to understand his creative process and aesthetic sensibilities. The opportunity to learn from him, even briefly, was almost as exciting as the job itself. By Wednesday evening, I felt ready. I had my outfit picked out, a black blazer with dark jeans, professional but creative enough for an agency environment. My portfolio was organized both digitally and in a leather binder my parents had given me for graduation. I even planned my route to account for Chicago traffic and potential L delays. I'd practiced my presentation countless times, timing it to ensure I could cover all my key points within the allocated time frame. I'd prepared answers to common interview questions, researched potential client scenarios I might be asked to address, and even practiced my handshake and eye contact in the mirror. But as I sat down to confirm my attendance, something made me hesitate. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Taylor hadn't returned any of my texts since Tuesday's phone call, which was unusual for her. We typically exchanged dozens of messages throughout the day. Random thoughts, memes, complaints about work, photos of interesting things we'd seen around the city. Our texting relationship had developed its own rhythm over the years. Good morning messages, lunch break check-ins, evening debriefs about our days. Sometimes we'd send each other screenshots of funny social media posts or photos of particularly good coffee or interesting street art. It was constant, comforting communication that had become even more important after our parents died. The silence from Taylor was completely out of character. Even when she was busy or stressed, she usually managed to send at least a few messages throughout the day. The last text I'd received from her was Tuesday morning before our phone conversation. A photo of her breakfast with the caption, "Trying to eat healthy, but this smoothie bowl tastes like sadness." I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. Maybe her phone was dead, or maybe she was just busy. But the nagging feeling in my stomach suggested something more serious was going on. I decided to walk over to her apartment in Wicker Park. The October evening was crisp, with that particular Chicago chill that cuts right through your jacket. The leaves on the trees lining Division Street were just starting to turn, creating a golden canopy overhead. The neighborhood was alive with its usual evening energy. Young professionals heading home from work, groups of friends meeting for dinner, couples walking hand in hand toward the trendy bars and restaurants that had transformed the area over the past decade. Wicker Park had always felt like the creative heart of Chicago to me. The streets were lined with vintage shops, independent bookstores, and art galleries housed in converted warehouses. Street murals covered the walls of buildings, and you could always hear live music drifting from one venue or another. It was the kind of neighborhood where creative professionals went to feel inspired and connected to something larger than their day jobs. Taylor had moved to the area right after college, drawn by the artistic atmosphere and the relatively affordable rent. Her building was one of those converted warehouses, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures that made young professionals feel like they were living somewhere edgy and artistic. The rent was higher than what I paid in Lincoln Park, but she'd always said the creative energy of the neighborhood was worth the extra cost. I buzzed her apartment, waiting in the small lobby with its polished concrete floors and industrial lighting. "Jazz? What are you doing here?" Her voice through the intercom sounded surprised, maybe even a little panicked. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Can I come up?" Another long pause. The silence stretched so long that I started to wonder if the intercom had cut out. Finally, her voice crackled through again. I'm not feeling well. Maybe we can catch up this weekend?" This was definitely not like Taylor. When one of us was sick, the other usually came over with soup and terrible reality TV. It was a tradition we'd established in college and had maintained ever since. Just 2 months ago, when I'd had the flu, Taylor had shown up at my apartment with homemade chicken soup, a stack of old magazines, and the entire first season of a dating show we'd been meaning to watch together. "Come on, Tay. It's me. I'm worried about you." The buzzer finally sounded, and I climbed the 3 flights to her apartment. The building's hallways were narrow and dimly lit, with exposed pipes running along the ceiling and original hardwood floors that creaked with every step. Each floor had only 4 apartments, and I could hear the muffled sounds of daily life behind each door. Someone cooking dinner, a television playing the evening news, a couple having a quiet conversation. When she opened the door, I could immediately see that she'd been crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she was still in pajamas even though it was almost 8 o'clock. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was wearing an old college sweatshirt that had seen better days. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping into her apartment. It was messier than usual. Takeout containers on the coffee table, clothes scattered around, her laptop open on the couch with what looked like a dozen browser tabs open. The usually cozy space felt chaotic and neglected. Taylor's apartment had always been my favorite place to visit. She had a natural talent for interior design, combining vintage finds from Wicker Park thrift stores with carefully chosen modern pieces. Her walls were covered with local artwork, photographs from our travels together, and design pieces she'd collected over the years. Usually, the space felt warm and inviting, like a magazine spread come to life. Tonight, it looked like someone was falling apart. "Nothing's wrong. I told you. I'm just not feeling well." But I could see her phone on the kitchen counter, and the screen kept lighting up with notifications. She definitely wasn't avoiding me because she was sick. "Taylor, we've been through too much together for you to lie to me now. What's going on? Is it Derek? Did something happen at work?" She sank onto her couch, and I could see her hands trembling slightly. Whatever was bothering her, it was big. "It's not Derek, it's..." She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Guilt. Deep, stomach-churning guilt. "What is it? You're scaring me." "I did something terrible, Jazz. Something I can't take back." My heart started racing. 1,000 possibilities ran through my mind. Was she in legal trouble? Financial trouble? Had something happened to someone we knew? "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. We always do. Just tell me." She was quiet for so long, I thought she might not answer. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic on Division Street and the occasional ping from her phone. "It's about your interview," she finally whispered. "My interview? What about it?" She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I called them, Jazz. I called Goldman Creative Solutions." The room suddenly felt very cold. "You called them? Why would you call them?" "I told them." Her voice broke. "I told them you'd already accepted another position. I told them you wouldn't be coming to the interview." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, my hand reaching for the wall to steady myself. "You did what?" "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I know how this sounds, but I had a reason. I had to do it." "You had to sabotage my career? You had to destroy the best opportunity I've ever had? What possible reason could you have?" The tears were flowing freely now, but I felt no sympathy for her. All I could think about was the interview I'd spent 3 days preparing for, the job that could have changed my entire life, the chance that was now gone forever. "Tell me why, Taylor. Right now. Tell me why you would do this to me." Taylor's apartment felt suffocating as I waited for her answer. The October wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the building, someone was playing music too loudly. But all I could focus on was my sister's tear-stained face and the words that had just shattered my world. "I got fired," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. You got fired. What does that have to do with my interview? No, Jazz, you don't understand. I got fired from Goldman Creative Solutions. The room started spinning. What are you talking about? You work at TechFlow downtown. You're a social media manager. That's what I told you, but it wasn't true. I've been working at Goldman for 8 months. I was their social media coordinator. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. I got fired last Monday, the same day you got your interview email. I sank into her armchair, trying to process what she was telling me. You've been lying to me for 8 months? I wanted to tell you, but when I first got the job, you were going through that rough patch at your company. Remember when they laid off half the creative team? You were so stressed about money, about your career, and I didn't want to make it worse by telling you I'd landed this amazing job at your dream company. So you lied instead. I thought I'd tell you eventually, when things got better for you. But then weeks turned into months, and it became this huge secret that felt impossible to confess. I stared at her, trying to reconcile this information with everything I thought I knew about my sister's life. What about Derek? All those stories about your startup, about your co-workers, your projects. Derek's real. He's my neighbor from across the hall, but we've never dated. I made up most of the stories about work because I didn't want you asking too many questions. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. For 8 months, while I'd been struggling to make ends meet, stressed about my career, worried about my future, my sister had been working at the company I dreamed of joining. And instead of supporting me, instead of maybe even helping me get my foot in the door, she'd lied to me every single day. Why did you get fired? Her face crumpled. I made a mistake, a big one. I accidentally posted a client's confidential campaign materials to their public social media account instead of saving it as a draft. It went viral for all the wrong reasons. The client was furious, threatened to sue, and Goldman had to do major damage control. And when you saw that I had an interview there, I panicked. I thought if you got the job, you'd eventually find out what happened. You'd learn about my mistake, about how I'd been lying to you. I was terrified you'd hate me. So instead, you decided to sabotage my interview? How does that make any sense? Taylor stood up and started pacing around her small living room, her hands gesturing frantically as she tried to explain. I know it doesn't make sense. I know it was wrong, but I was desperate, and I wasn't thinking clearly. I thought maybe if you didn't get this particular job, another opportunity would come along, and you'd never have to know about any of this. Another opportunity? Taylor, do you have any idea how rare interviews like this are? Goldman Creative Solutions gets thousands of applications for every position. I might never get another chance like this. I know. I realized that as soon as I hung up the phone. I've been sick with guilt ever since. I looked around her apartment with new eyes. The mess, the takeout containers, the fact that she'd been avoiding me. It all made sense now. She'd been falling apart with guilt while I'd been excitedly preparing for an interview that no longer existed. What exactly did you tell them? I called the main number and asked to speak to Margaret Goldman's assistant. I said I was calling on your behalf because you'd been in an accident and couldn't call yourself. She paused, looking ashamed. I said you'd accepted a position with another agency and wouldn't be able to attend the interview. An accident? You told them I was in an accident? I thought it would sound more believable than just saying you'd changed your mind. The cruelty of it hit me like a wave. Not only had she destroyed my opportunity, but she'd done it in a way that made me look unprofessional and unreliable. Even if I could somehow explain the situation, who would believe such an absurd story? Have they tried to contact me? I asked, pulling out my phone to check my email. I don't think so. When I called, the assistant said they'd make a note in their system and move forward with other candidates. I scrolled through my emails from the past 2 days, hoping against hope that there might be some message asking for confirmation or expressing concern about my supposed accident. There was nothing. Taylor, do you understand what you've done? This wasn't just a job interview. This was my career. This was my future. I know, and I hate myself for it. I've been trying to figure out how to fix it ever since I made the call. Fix it? How could you possibly fix this? She went to her laptop and opened one of the many browser tabs. I've been researching other creative agencies in Chicago. Look, there's McKinney & Associates. They're supposed to be really good, and Creative Circle is always posting new positions. I even found this boutique agency in River North that specializes in brand identity work. I stared at her in disbelief. You think you can just find me some random job listings and that makes up for what you've done? No, Of course not. But maybe I can help you get interviews at these other places. I still have contacts in the industry, people who don't know about what happened at Goldman. Contacts you made while lying to me for 8 months. Jazz, please. I know I messed up. I know I ruined everything. But we're family. We're all each other has. There has to be a way to work through this. I stood up, feeling like I needed to get out of her apartment before I said something I'd regret. The walls felt like they were closing in, and I could smell the stale takeout food and her guilt-scented anxiety. I need some air. I need to think. Don't leave. Please, let's talk about this. Let's figure out how to move forward. Move forward? Taylor, I don't even know who you are anymore. For 8 months, you've been living a completely different life and lying to me about every detail. And when you had the chance to come clean, instead, you chose to sabotage the most important opportunity of my career. I was scared. I was ashamed. I didn't know how to tell you. So you decided to hurt me instead of trusting me. I headed toward the door, but her voice stopped me. Where are you going? I don't know. Maybe I'll walk around, try to process this. Maybe I'll go home and update my resume, since I apparently need to start my job search all over again. Please don't hate me. I can't lose you too, not after Mom and Dad. The mention of our parents made me pause at the door. We'd promised each other after the funeral that we'd always be there for each other, that we'd never let anything come between us. But this felt different. This wasn't just a sibling disagreement or a misunderstanding. This was a fundamental betrayal of trust. I don't hate you, Taylor, but I'm not sure I can forgive you either. Not right now. I left her apartment and walked aimlessly through Wicker Park as the sun set over Chicago. The streets were busy with people heading home from work, grabbing dinner, meeting friends for drinks. Everyone seemed to have purpose, direction, somewhere to be. I felt utterly lost. My phone buzzed with a text from Taylor. I'm going to call them back. I'm going to try to explain. I typed back quickly. Don't you dare. You've done enough damage. Another text. Then what can I do? There has to be something. I didn't respond. What could she do? The interview was supposed to be in 2 days. By now, they'd probably already scheduled someone else for my time slot. The opportunity was gone, and no amount of explanation could bring it back. As I walked past the colorful murals and trendy restaurants of Division Street, I tried to imagine calling Goldman Creative Solutions myself. How could I possibly explain that my sister had lied about my accepting another position? How could I convince them that I was professional and reliable when my own family member had made me look flaky and disorganized? The worst part was the time I'd wasted. 3 days of intensive preparation, 3 days of excitement and hope, 3 days of imagining a different future. And all the while, the interview I was preparing for no longer existed. By the time I made it back to my apartment in Lincoln Park, it was past 10 o'clock. My studio felt even smaller than usual, cramped and depressing after the emotional upheaval of the evening. I sat on my bed and opened my laptop, staring at the Goldman Creative Solutions website I'd memorized over the past 3 days. I clicked on their careers page and saw that the creative director position was no longer listed. They'd moved quickly to fill the spot, probably with one of the other candidates they'd been considering. My opportunity was officially gone. I closed the laptop and lay back on my bed, staring at the ceiling. Outside, I could hear the familiar sounds of Chicago at night. Sirens in the distance, people talking on the sidewalk below, the rumble of the L train a few blocks away. These sounds usually comforted me, made me feel connected to the city I loved. Tonight, they just reminded me that life was going on for everyone else while mine had just fallen apart. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Taylor. I love you, Jazz. I'm so sorry. I turned off my phone without responding. I wasn't ready to think about forgiveness or moving forward or any of the other things she wanted to discuss. Right now, I just needed to grieve the future I'd lost. Friday arrived like a cruel joke. At 2 p.m., I should have been sitting in Goldman Creative Solutions' sleek conference room, presenting my portfolio to Margaret Goldman and her team. Instead, I was at my current job, staring blankly at yet another social media graphic for a discount mattress company. Jasmine, are you okay? Asked my colleague Ryan, appearing at my desk with a concerned expression. You seem really out of it today. I'm fine, I lied, trying to refocus on the computer screen. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was designing graphics for a company that sold cheap mattresses when I could have been developing campaigns for global brands. Are you sure? You've been working on that same design for like an hour, and it's usually a 15-minute job for you. I saved the file and turned to look at him. Ryan was a good guy, a fellow designer who'd started at the company around the same time I did. He was also the only person at work who knew I'd been interviewing elsewhere. Remember that big interview I mentioned? The one I was really excited about? The one that was supposed to be today? How did it go? It didn't. It got canceled. I couldn't bring myself to tell him the whole truth. The story was too humiliating, too complicated. Oh man, I'm sorry. What happened? There was a miscommunication. They filled the position with someone else. Ryan's face fell. He knew how much I'd been hoping for a career change. That sucks. But hey, maybe it wasn't meant to be. Something better might come along. Something better. That's what everyone always said when opportunities fell through. But I'd done my research. There wasn't anything better than Goldman Creative Solutions, at least not in Chicago. I'd just lost my best shot at the career I'd always wanted. The rest of the day dragged by. Every time I checked my phone, I saw more messages from Taylor that I couldn't bring myself to answer. She'd sent everything from lengthy apologies to links to job postings to photos of our parents, as if reminding me of our shared loss would somehow make her betrayal hurt less. By the time 5 o'clock came around, I was emotionally exhausted. I packed up my things and headed for the elevator, already dreading the weekend ahead. What was I supposed to do with all the free time I'd planned to spend celebrating my new job? Jasmine Martinez? I turned around to see a woman I didn't recognize approaching me. She was probably in her early 40s, impeccably dressed in a way that screamed executive, with perfectly styled brown hair and confident posture. Yes, I'm Margaret Goldman. I was wondering if we could talk. My heart stopped. Margaret Goldman, CEO of Goldman Creative Solutions, was standing in the lobby of my shabby downtown office building. For a moment, I wondered if I was hallucinating from stress. Mrs. Goldman? What are you doing here? I was hoping we could grab coffee. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you. I looked around the lobby, half expecting cameras to pop out and reveal this was some kind of elaborate prank. I'm not sure I understand. Would you mind if we walk to that Starbucks across the street? I promise this will make sense in a few minutes. Still stunned, I followed her out of the building and across LaSalle Street to the busy Starbucks. The afternoon rush was in full swing, with business people grabbing their caffeine fixes before heading home. Margaret ordered a green tea while I fumbled through ordering my usual latte, my hands shaking slightly. We found a small table in the corner, away from the main flow of foot traffic. Margaret settled into her chair with the kind of grace that comes from years of commanding boardrooms. First, she said, I owe you an apology. An apology? Mrs. Goldman, I think there's been some confusion. I was supposed to interview with you today, but there was a miscommunication, and I know you've probably filled the position already. That's exactly what I wanted to talk to you about. The call we received on Wednesday night was unusual. My stomach dropped. Unusual how? Well, for starters, the person who called claimed to be calling on your behalf because you'd been in an accident, but they knew very specific details about your portfolio and your background that wouldn't make sense for someone else to know. I felt my face burning with embarrassment. Mrs. Goldman, I can explain. Let me finish. The caller also seemed extremely nervous and kept contradicting themselves. They first said you'd been in a car accident, then mentioned it was a fall, then went back to saying it was a car accident. It was inconsistent. I'm mortified. I don't even know what to say. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Here's the thing, Jasmine. In my 20 years running this company, I've heard every excuse in the book. I've had candidates no-show for interviews. I've had people accept offers and then disappear. I've had family members call with all kinds of stories. But I've never had someone call with such a poorly constructed lie about someone I was genuinely excited to meet. You were excited to meet me? Your portfolio is exceptional. Your design sensibility is exactly what we're looking for, and your experience managing projects at your current company, limited as it may be, shows real potential. When we got that strange phone call, my first instinct wasn't to move on to the next candidate. It was to figure out what was really going on. I stared at my untouched latte, wishing I could disappear into the floor. So, you investigated? I had my assistant do some research. We found your LinkedIn profile, your personal website, your social media presence. Everything suggested someone who was serious about their career and professional in their communications. It didn't match the chaotic phone call we'd received. Then we discovered something interesting. We found a Taylor Martinez listed as a former employee in our system. She was terminated earlier this week for a social media incident. Same last name as you, same emergency contact information in her file. The pieces were falling into place, and I could see from Margaret's expression that she'd figured out exactly what had happened. "Your sister," she said simply. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. "I'm guessing she didn't tell you she worked for us." "No, she told me she worked at a tech startup." I had no idea. Margaret sat back in her chair, studying me carefully. "This is certainly a first for me. I've never had a candidate's family member sabotage their interview out of embarrassment about their own employment situation. Mrs. Goldman, I am so sorry. I had no idea any of this was happening. I've been preparing for this interview all week. I researched your company, prepared presentations, planned my entire schedule around meeting with you today. I would never, ever have someone call to cancel on my behalf, especially not with some made-up story. I believe you. Your reaction right now tells me everything I need to know about your character and your professionalism. But I'm sure you've already moved forward with other candidates. I understand that the position is probably filled." Margaret smiled slightly. "Actually, it's not. We postponed all the interviews scheduled for today because we wanted to get to the bottom of what happened with you first. You were our top choice, Jasmine. We weren't ready to give up on you just because of a confusing phone call." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. After 3 days of devastation, was it possible that my dream opportunity wasn't lost after all? "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that if you're still interested in the position, I'd like to reschedule your interview. Maybe we could meet Monday morning instead." "Yes," I said immediately. "Yes, absolutely. I would love that." "Good. But first, I have to ask, what's your relationship with your sister like now? This kind of family drama can sometimes spill over into professional situations." I took a deep breath, thinking about Taylor's tear-stained face and desperate text messages. Honestly, I'm not sure. What she did was a huge betrayal, and I'm still processing it. But I can promise you that my personal relationships won't interfere with my work. I've always kept my professional and personal lives separate. I appreciate your honesty. And for what it's worth, I think your sister's actions came from a place of shame and fear rather than malice. That doesn't excuse what she did, but it might be worth considering as you decide how to move forward with your relationship. We talked for another 20 minutes about the company, the role, and what the interview process would look like. Margaret was nothing like the intimidating executive I'd imagined. She was warm, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in my career goals and creative vision. As we prepared to leave, she handed me her business card. My direct email is on there. If you have any questions before Monday, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much for taking the time to track me down and clear this up. I can't tell you how much this means to me. Just bring your A game on Monday. I have a feeling you're exactly what we're looking for." I walked back to my apartment in a daze. The October evening was crisp and clear, with that perfect fall weather that makes Chicago feel magical. The trees along Lincoln Avenue were dressed in brilliant oranges and reds, and the setting sun cast everything in golden light. My phone had been buzzing with messages all day, but for the first time since Wednesday night, I felt ready to face them. Most were from Taylor, increasingly desperate pleas for forgiveness and communication. But there was also a message from an unknown number that made me stop walking. "Hi, Jasmine. This is Derek from Taylor's building. I think we should talk. Can you call me when you get this?" Derek, the neighbor Taylor had claimed to be dating, who was apparently just a friend she'd used as a cover story. What could he possibly want to discuss with me? I called the number as I climbed the stairs to my apartment. "Jasmine, thanks for calling me back." "Hi, Derek. I'm not sure why you wanted to talk to me. I barely know anything about you except that my sister has been lying about your relationship." "Yeah, about that. Listen, I think there are some things you should know about what's been going on with Taylor. Things that might help you understand why she did what she did." "I'm not sure I want to understand. What she did was unforgivable. Maybe. But she's been falling apart since she lost her job, and it's gotten worse since she made that phone call. I'm worried about her." I unlocked my apartment and sank onto my couch. "Worried about her how?" "She hasn't left her apartment since Wednesday night. She's not eating, barely sleeping. She keeps talking about how she's destroyed the only good relationship in her life. Yesterday, she mentioned something about it being better if she just disappeared." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean, disappeared?" I don't know exactly, but she's not in a good place, Jasmine. I know she hurt you, and I'm not trying to excuse what she did, but I think she needs help. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the day's emotional roller coaster. Just when I thought I'd processed everything that had happened, there was another layer of complexity to consider. Derek, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this information. I'm still angry with her. I'm still hurt, and I'm not sure I'm the right person to help her right now. I get that, but you're the only family she has, and despite everything that's happened, I think you still care about her. He was right, and I hated that he was right. Underneath all the anger and betrayal, I was terrified of losing Taylor. She was my only connection to our parents, my only family, the only person who shared my memories of growing up in our chaotic but loving household. What do you think I should do? I think you should talk to her. Not about forgiveness or moving forward, just about making sure she's okay. She needs to know that even though you're angry, you're not going to abandon her. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment as darkness fell over Lincoln Park. The streetlights came on, casting pools of yellow light on the sidewalk below. I could hear my neighbors moving around in the apartments above and below me, the normal sounds of people living their lives. But nothing felt normal anymore. In the span of 3 days, I'd discovered that my sister had been lying to me for months, that she'd sabotaged the biggest opportunity of my career, and that she was now potentially in crisis. I'd also somehow salvaged that opportunity and had a second chance at my dream job. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Taylor's contact. My thumb hovered over her name for a long moment before I finally pressed call. Jazz? Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. Hey, we need to talk. Sunday evening found me standing outside Taylor's apartment building again. But this time, everything felt different. It had been 4 days since her confession, and the anger that had consumed me was slowly being replaced by something more complicated, a mixture of hurt, concern, and reluctant understanding. Derek met me in the lobby. He was younger than I'd expected, probably mid-20s, with the kind of earnest face that made you want to trust him immediately. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I know this isn't easy. How is she? Better today than yesterday? She actually ate something, which is progress, but she's still pretty fragile." We rode the elevator up to the 3rd floor in silence. Derek knocked gently on Taylor's door. "Tay? Jasmine's here." The door opened slowly, and I barely recognized my sister. She'd lost weight in just 4 days, and her usually perfect appearance was replaced by rumpled clothes and unwashed hair. But it was her eyes that really struck me. They held a devastation I'd only seen once before, right after our parents' funeral. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." Derek cleared his throat. "I'm going to give you two some privacy. I'll be across the hall if you need anything." Taylor's apartment was in even worse condition than it had been on Wednesday night. The takeout containers had multiplied, and there were tissues scattered everywhere. Her laptop was still open on the couch, displaying what looked like job search websites and forums about career recovery. "You look terrible," I said, settling into the same armchair I'd occupied during our confrontation. "I feel terrible." She sat on the edge of her couch, maintaining distance between us. "Derek said you might come by, but I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either, but then he told me you were talking about disappearing." Taylor's face crumpled. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I just meant maybe leaving Chicago, starting over somewhere else where I haven't ruined everything. Running away isn't going to fix this, Tay. I know, but staying here and facing what I've done isn't exactly appealing either." I looked around the apartment, taking in the evidence of her self-destruction. Despite everything she'd put me through, seeing her like this hurt. She was still my sister, still the person who'd held my hand at our parents' funeral and promised we'd take care of each other. "I have something to tell you," I said. "Margaret Goldman came to see me Friday afternoon." Taylor's head snapped up. "What? What did she want?" She figured out what really happened. She knew the phone call was fake. The color drained from Taylor's already pale face. "Oh God, did she tell you about my mistake? About why I got fired?" She mentioned it. But mostly, she wanted to understand why someone would sabotage their own sister's interview. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that I had no idea what you'd done, that I'd been preparing for the interview all week, and that I would never have authorized someone to call on my behalf." Taylor buried her face in her hands. "So now she knows what kind of family you come from. Great. I've probably ruined any chance you had of working there." Actually, she rescheduled my interview for tomorrow morning. Taylor looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. She what? Apparently I was their top choice for the position. They weren't ready to give up on me because of one confusing phone call. For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw something other than despair cross Taylor's face. Relief, hope, maybe even a hint of the happiness she used to show when good things happened to me. Jazz, that's incredible. I can't believe, after what I did, they're still willing to interview you? Margaret Goldman is a smart woman. She could tell the difference between a candidate who was unreliable and a candidate whose sister was having a breakdown. I wasn't having a breakdown, Taylor protested weakly. Really? Because this apartment suggests otherwise. She looked around at the mess surrounding her and laughed bitterly. Okay, maybe I was having a small breakdown. Taylor, I need to understand something. When you got the job at Goldman, why didn't you tell me? Forget about me going through a rough patch at work. You know I would have been happy for you. I'm always happy when good things happen to you. She was quiet for a long moment, picking at a loose thread on her pajama pants. Do you remember when we were kids and you won that art contest in middle school? The question seemed to come from nowhere. The one where I got to display my painting at the library? Yeah. Do you remember what happened when we got home? I thought back to that day. I'd been so excited to tell our parents about winning, but when we'd walked into the house, Mom and Dad had been fighting about money again. Dad had lost another job, and they were worried about making rent. Mom and Dad were arguing, and you never told them about the contest. You just put your ribbon in your drawer and never mentioned it. I didn't want to bother them when they were stressed. That's what I learned from you, Jazz, that when someone you love is struggling, you don't add to their burden by celebrating your own success. The memory hit me like a punch to the chest. I had done that, hadn't I? I'd hidden my achievement because I thought it would be selfish to demand attention when my parents were worried about survival. But that's not the same thing, Taylor. We're adults now, and we're supposed to support each other through both the good times and the bad. I know that logically, but emotionally? I still felt like that 12-year-old girl watching her big sister hide her accomplishments to protect other people's feelings. So you decided to protect my feelings by lying to me for 8 months? I decided to protect your feelings by waiting until you were in a better place career-wise. But then months went by, and the lie got bigger and bigger, and I didn't know how to come clean without looking like a terrible sister. I could see the logic in her twisted reasoning, even though it was fundamentally flawed. Taylor had always been the more emotional of the two of us, the one who made decisions with her heart instead of her head. And when you saw I had an interview at Goldman, I panicked. I thought if you got the job, you'd eventually find out about my mistake, about how I'd been fired. I thought you'd realize I'd been lying to you and you'd hate me. She wiped her eyes with a crumpled tissue. So I made sure you wouldn't get the job, which was the stupidest thing I could have possibly done. Because now I know about the lying anyway. Because now you know about the lying. And I destroyed your opportunity, and I proved that I'm exactly the kind of person who would sabotage her own sister out of fear and selfishness. I stood up and walked to her window, looking out at the Sunday evening activity on Division Street. Couples were walking hand in hand, groups of friends were heading to dinner, families were enjoying the last warm evening before Chicago's brutal winter set in. Everyone looked happy, carefree, unburdened by the kind of family drama that had consumed our lives for the past week. Taylor, what you did was wrong. It was selfish and destructive, and it hurt me more than you can imagine. I know. But I also understand why you did it. Not the sabotage part, that was inexcusable. But the lying, the fear of disappointing me, the worry about how I'd react to your success while I was struggling. I understand those feelings because I've had them too. You have. I turned back to face her. Do you remember when I got into the Art Institute and you didn't get into Northwestern? Of course, that was one of the worst days of my life. I almost didn't go. I was so guilty about getting into my dream school while you were devastated about your rejection that I considered deferring for a year. You never told me that. Because I knew you'd insist I go, and I didn't want you to feel responsible for my education. But I felt guilty about my success when you were hurting, just like you felt guilty about your job when I was struggling. Taylor stared at me, processing this information. We're kind of messed up, aren't we? We learned some unhealthy patterns from growing up in a house where resources were scarce and emotions ran high. But that doesn't mean we can't change. How do we change? I sat back down in the armchair, feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders. We start by being honest with each other. No more lying to protect feelings. No more hiding good news because the other person is having a hard time. No more sabotaging each other out of fear or jealousy. I can do that. I want to do that. And you need to get help, Tay. This level of self-destruction isn't normal. Derek's worried about you, and so am I. I've been thinking about that. Maybe I should talk to someone, like a therapist. I think that's a good idea. And maybe we should consider family counseling too, to work through some of these patterns we learned growing up. For the first time since I'd arrived, Taylor smiled slightly. You'd be willing to do that? Even after what I did? You're my sister. You're the only family I have left. We've been through too much together to let this destroy our relationship. I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not. But I'm giving it to you anyway, because holding on to anger is exhausting, and because I love you despite your incredibly poor decision-making skills. Taylor started crying again, but these tears looked different, relieved rather than despairing. What can I do to make this right? There has to be something. You can start by taking care of yourself. Clean up this apartment, eat some real food, and make an appointment with a therapist. And you can promise me that you'll never, ever interfere with my career again. I promise. What else? You can help me prepare for tomorrow's interview. You worked at Goldman for 8 months. You know their culture, their expectations, their interview style. If you really want to make amends, help me succeed. Taylor wiped her eyes and sat up straighter. I can do that. I can definitely do that. We spent the next 3 hours going through everything Taylor knew about Goldman Creative Solutions. She told me about the company's internal culture, their recent campaign successes and failures, the personalities of the people who would be interviewing me. She shared insights about Margaret Goldman's leadership style and the creative direction the company was moving toward. Margaret values authenticity above everything else, Taylor said, as we wrapped up our preparation session. She's not impressed by people who try to tell her what they think she wants to hear. She wants to know who you really are and what you actually think. That's good to know. And Jazz, when you get this job, not if, when, don't feel guilty about succeeding. I'm going to be genuinely happy for you, the way I should have been all along. What about you? What are you going to do about work? I don't know yet. I need to figure out how to rebuild my reputation in the industry. Maybe I'll freelance for a while or look for opportunities outside of Chicago. But that's my problem to solve, not yours. As I prepared to leave, Taylor walked me to the door. Jazz, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for giving me a chance to explain. Thank you for being honest. Finally. Good luck tomorrow. You're going to be amazing. I walked home through Lincoln Park as the sun set over Chicago, feeling lighter than I had in days. The interview was less than 12 hours away, and for the first time, I felt genuinely confident about my chances. Not because the opportunity had been handed to me, but because I'd earned it through my work, my talent, and my professionalism. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. I put on my carefully chosen outfit, the black blazer and dark jeans that struck the perfect balance between professional and creative. I carried my portfolio in the leather binder my parents had given me, along with the new presentation I'd refined with Taylor's insights. The Goldman Creative Solutions office was everything I'd imagined and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago River, and the walls were covered with award-winning campaigns and innovative design work. The energy in the office was palpable, creative, collaborative, inspiring. Margaret Goldman met me in the lobby personally, just as warm and professional as she'd been at our coffee meeting. "Ready for this?" she asked as we headed toward the conference room. More than ready. The interview lasted 2 hours. I presented my portfolio, discussed my creative process, and answered questions about everything from project management to client relations. The panel, Margaret, the head of HR, and the outgoing creative director, seemed genuinely impressed with my work and my vision for the role. "We have one final question," Margaret said, as the interview wound down. "This position requires someone who can handle pressure, navigate complex situations, and maintain professionalism even when personal issues arise. Can you give us an example of a time when you've demonstrated these qualities?" I thought about the events of the past week, the betrayal, the confusion, the emotional roller coaster of nearly losing and then regaining this opportunity. I thought about Taylor's breakdown and my decision to forgive her despite my anger. "Actually," I said, "I can give you a very recent example." I told them about the past week, carefully and honestly. I explained Taylor's deception and sabotage, Margaret's investigation, and our coffee meeting, and my decision to work through the family conflict rather than let it derail my professional goals. The situation tested everything I believe about professionalism, family loyalty, and personal integrity, I concluded. But it also showed me that I can handle crisis while maintaining my focus on what matters most, doing good work and building a meaningful career. Margaret smiled. That's exactly the kind of resilience and maturity we're looking for. An hour later, I was walking out of the Goldman Creative Solutions office with a job offer in hand. The salary was even better than I'd hoped. The benefits were comprehensive, and I would be starting in 2 weeks. I called Taylor from the sidewalk outside the building. "I got it," I said as soon as she answered. "You got it? You got the job?" "I got the job." I could hear her crying through the phone, but these were happy tears. "I'm so proud of you, Jazz. You deserve this. You deserve everything good that's going to come from this. We both do. We both deserve good things." As I walked back through downtown Chicago toward my soon-to-be former office, I thought about the strange journey that had brought me to this moment. If Taylor hadn't made her terrible mistake, I might never have met Margaret Goldman personally. I might never have seen how the company handled crisis or demonstrated my own ability to navigate complex personal situations. I wasn't grateful for Taylor's betrayal. That had been devastating and wrong. But I was grateful for the way it had ultimately revealed both my sister's capacity for growth and my own strength in the face of adversity. 6 months later, I was thriving in my role as creative director at Goldman Creative Solutions. Taylor had found a new job at a small nonprofit, doing social media work that felt meaningful to her. We were both in therapy, individual and family counseling, working through the patterns that had led to our crisis. Our relationship was different now, built on a foundation of honesty rather than the careful protection of each other's feelings. We celebrated each other's successes without guilt, supported each other through failures without resentment, and trusted each other with the truth even when it was uncomfortable. The apartment in Lincoln Park had been replaced by a spacious loft in River North, close to my new office. The walls were covered with campaigns I'd developed, awards I'd won, and photos of the team I now led. But my favorite piece of decoration was a framed photo of Taylor and me at our parents' grave on the anniversary of their death, both of us finally at peace with who we were and who we were becoming. Sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the most important growth. Sometimes losing everything helps you realize what truly matters. And sometimes, when you think your family has failed you, you discover that love and forgiveness are stronger than any mistake. The interview I almost lost became the job that changed my life. The sister who betrayed me became the person who helped me understand my own strength. And the crisis that nearly destroyed us became the foundation for a better, more honest relationship than we'd ever had before. Life rarely goes according to plan. But sometimes, when you're brave enough to face the truth and strong enough to forgive, it goes somewhere even better than you imagined.